I'll have to edit this together. I accidentally turned it off. There's, you can't see it from that side. Anyway, there's 2 rubber plugs, and then there's 2 screws that remove the running lights. And with all that removed, then you can get into the inside of the trunk lid, and you have the plug for your left side. This is the extra wire that I ran. Now, the one video he had it to where he run a male and female to unplug it, plug it. I don't ever plan on unplugging it, so I just used a wire tap to tap into, and then just cut the one side, and well, I guess I didn't cut it, I just ran it up to it. But so that's that side. But basically I'm gonna have to do the same thing, run a separate wire and tap into just this right side blinker. That'll separate this, because where this is plugged into is, you have to, once you get this light removed, then you take off this cover. It just all snaps in. It's just got the 3 clips on it, and it pops off, and that exposes the clippy here. When you get the Victory trunk light, it comes with a wire harness that plugs into this, and then so it allows that to tap in. So let me get into, it's my Miss Madison. She's my helper today and making a bunch of noise with her tail. So I don't know if I have it. Let me pause this a minute. Okay, I thought I had a printout of the explanation of all the wires. Now, I'll put the links. There's 2 descriptions that I found of how all this goes together. There's a couple wires that you don't use on the output side. The only ones you use on the output side is the brown and violet. The violet is where you run a separate wire to the left side blinker, and I have that running up through the there's extra plugs back there, running up through the wire harness and coming up through. And then the brown right turn I also have running up, and I think I just have that tapped into, and that's what I'll have to go in and fix. But the only other issue I had with this wire harness, now there's 2 sets that's running. I don't know if you can see it. There's this one that's wrapped in a fabric, and then you have the one that's wrapped in tape. The one that's wrapped in tape is the one that you need to cut into and use. There's looks like a green and red, green and orange. Now, of course, I ran extra wires just to get it longer. That's one description. But when I did this the first time on my first bike, the first Vision I had, which is a whole nother long story on that, I just spliced it in right here and then tucked the whole thing underneath, and there's enough of a gap to where you can put this whole thing up underneath here if you want. But other description, just to save it and get it out of the way, is I cut extra wires and tapped it in still, and you can tuck it in back underneath here and it's out of the way. But the one thing that I've had issues with on both the bikes was the original description of which wires to tap into. Says, I forget which one it is, it taps into the white and red. You know, in the pictures in that original description, and again I'll have the link in the description of this one since I'll put it on YouTube, is they only showed one white red wire. Well, when you unwrap this taped harness here, I actually have 3 white with red wires. 2 of them is running, end to end, and then there's a third one that is already coming from the rear, and it just doubles back into itself. Now, I kind of just hope and prayed and guessed that I tapped into the right one, and both times I've never had any issue. So I use these fancy wire splicers, but again, like I said, I went ahead and bought extra lengths, and then made it longer and clipped it on both ends. Again, that's probably a little bit more than what you need. I'm not the greatest with electrical. If I have a good description and I can see it, then I'll be able to figure it out. But the one thing, again, that I had an issue with, let me see if I can, okay, so the ground's running. I just got the ground running here. Now there's two grounds coming out, one out of each end of this unit. And originally I wasn't for sure if it mattered which one, but I think I read in one of the comments descriptions on either Vogue.net or one of them was you only need one. So as long as you have one of the grounds underneath one of these bolts here, or there's two on this side, whichever one's convenient for you, then you shouldn't have any issues. Now, the other thing that I figured out, besides tapping into everything here, and again, I'm sorry, I wish I had the printout and I could read you off the different ones, but so I know for sure you tap into your power, I believe, is this green and red. And then, since I already have this all together, but the other one I tapped into is a blue and red. There's the other end of the green and red. What's the other one? I think they only tap into there's three. There's a solid blue, a blue and red, green and red, and then there's one of the white and reds. Again, on mine, I actually have three. There's two where there's a solid white, and then there's two that have white and red, and then there's a third white and red that just comes from the back, doubles back like a loop, and then continues back up. I don't know what that one is, but tap into one of the white and reds that goes, from the length left and right, and I believe it's, like I said, I just hoped and prayed and guessed. I don't know which one's which, but like I said, but anyway, so the only other issue, not an issue, is there's this plug here. Now, I believe this is what you actually unplug if you go to remove your trunk. Well, the one wire, originally when I did this on my 2014, like I said, this is a 2015, that's a whole nother long story, is in those original descriptions, it doesn't necessarily say per se, that's a whole lot of says, that the wire that you separate, let me make sure I have which one it is, has to be after this plug, and I believe it is see, I have both of these running up through. I already have them taped, so I forget which one's which. So I believe the left side is a separate wire, but the right, which is the brown, the right turn gets spliced into, and I thought I had it separated, gets into the wire after this plug. Because because all the wires coming from this harness actually goes down to your lower, so everything tapped into this harness is where it's picking up the signals. So that's your input side of the 4710 gets plugged into here, and then your output side, you only have two wires. You got the separate that goes directly to the left, and then your right side taps into the harness after this plug, which is actually coming out of the fabric raft. And again, in that original video, or the original description, it didn't really specify that the output had to be after this plug. I tapped the output originally into here and couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. Well, these go down into your lower blinkers. So these, again, this is just picking up the signals coming into the 4710, and then again, you only have 2 wires that's used coming out of this. I know I'm repeating a lot, but this is how it makes sense to me. So again, now if you don't have like I said, the Victory trunk light, this will work for you. You have, I believe, you have a solid blue, a red, a violet, and a brown. So you have 4 wires coming out of the input side. You also do not need to use, that's also in the original description, you don't need to use these extra plugs. That's I forget what it's called, but you don't need these. So you have 4 wires, well, I guess in the ground, attached to the input side, which again is in this taped up harness underneath the fairing here, the fender, I guess you could call it. Like I said, I just use these wire taps. You can either go right, I use the extra wire to extend it, but you can go tap right into it with the wires that are there and tuck it underneath here. There's room there. Or if you want it completely out of the way, you can put the extra wires and tuck it there. So 4 wires in, tapped right here, 2 wires out. Like I said, the violet goes directly to the left side blinker, so it separates the 2 running lights, and then the brown goes up to the right. But when you add in this, because it's tapped into the brown right side, when you have your blinker on here, it makes this blink. So I'm going to run a separate wire directly up to this out of the output, the brown wire side, out of the output of the 4710 module, and again, that'll separate between the left and right running lights to make them blink and break, but then that'll also separate the Victory light from this right blinker, so these do not blink at the same time. Even though it looks kind of cool, I'm sure there's a way somehow to make it blink with the left and the right separately, but again, that's beyond my brain activity for that. So I'm going to do what I need to do and get it all back. Well, I'll make sure it works before I get it back together, but then yeah, so hopefully I'll wrap this up, and hopefully this will help at least one other person. So again, the 4710 module takes your running lights on the top of the trunk, separates them between left and right, make them blink and break. But then, like I said, if you add in the Victory trunk light emblem, you also have to run a separate wire again to the left and right out of the output side, so your Victory emblem will not blink with the right and or left blinker, depending on how you do it. So let me do what I need to do, and I'll get back to you again. Thanks. Okay, so I couldn't remember exactly what color wire I was coming out of. So on your output side, on the 4710, the brown goes to the right blinker. And I ran an extra piece, but what I tapped into, again, after this big plug that's wrapped in the fabric, you open this up on the tape side. I don't know if you can really see it here or not, but it's the green and pink. So if you come up to the plug for the right side and remove the tape, this is that other end of the green and pink. So what I'm going to do, and again, this part of it is to separate this from the blinker, because right now this is tapped into the plug, which has that green, and you can kind of see it right there. That's the green and pink. So that comes from down there comes up, and there's a Y plug, I guess that's what you call it, a Y connector that connects, technically right now, your right now blinker with your Victory running light. So I'm going to run a separate wire. I'm going to cut this here, and I'll have to re-splice this green and pink back into. So I guess if you're doing this from scratch, you would eliminate this splice into the green and pink and just run 2 separate wires from the output directly to up to, and I'll splice into the green and pink for the right and left blinker. So if you do not have the Victory lit emblem, you would need to again run a separate wire from the violet side up to the left, and then you would tap into this green and pink for your right blinker with the brown output wire, which is coming out of it. So without the Victory emblem, you tap into this part of the wire harness after this big plug. If you're going to run with the Victory emblem, then you need to run, you would not splice into here. You would just run a separate wire from the output side up to this part. And what you're doing then is you're bypassing this Y plug. The Y plug here is the problem. If you tap into the line down here, then your signal is going to be coming in front of the Y plug, which would send a signal to both the left blinker or the right blinker and the emblem. So by running a separate wire directly from the output to here, then only this will receive the signal from the 4710, leaving your lit emblem to come down to this connector, which would come down to here, which I'm going to have to reconnect with a little small, just a splice, I guess just a little round where you crimp both ends. So I'll have to reconnect here. So hopefully that's not too confusing. But again, this is to eliminate the Victory emblem from blinking with the right blinker. So again, that's what I'm going to do, and I'll get it all together and I'll test it, and then I'll rehash this again for the 12th time, and hopefully it'll make sense to whoever's getting ready to do this that had the issues I had. Okay, so back to fixing my messed up splice. So what I did, I had to, where I had the right blinker, the brown, no, which one? The brown goes to the right. Okay, so I had the brown initially spliced into the green and pink after the big plug here, but that caused, again, right blinker and the Victory trunk light to blink at the same time. So I had to repair this splice here. So if you have the Victory, and again, I'll maybe even do a second smaller video to sum all this up, part 1 and part 2, the long version and short version. So if you have the Victory trunk light, you do not need to splice into this after this trunk plug. That's what we'll call this now. So what I had to do, again, the only 2 wires coming out of the output is the brown and violet. And the violet is a separate wire that comes up and goes to the left blinker, which I'll show you how it works here in a minute. But then I also had to end up having to run a separate long wire, the brown, to that pink and red on the right side. So now the Victory stays lit, but now I have right blinker. So what I did was I ran a separate wire, long wire, and you have to cut because that pink and green would continue on to this if you didn't keep it separate. So I snipped it and then just still used a splice to take that the brown wire up directly to the light, bypassing this connector here, which is where again your victory light is plugged in. So now I have right blinker separate, the light, and then running light for the left. So now I have left blinker, victory light, running light. And that should basically be it. Like I said, I might go ahead and stop this and make a second just short this is what I had to do, or this is how it hooks up video, because I don't know how long this actually is now. 20 minutes? Yeah, that's a freaking long time. So again, I'll do a second video to sum this all up.